Hello, Ricardo. Welcome to the program. It's good to have you. It's been a while, actually, and it's good to be able to have a chance to talk with you about this. And I think, even though we have something we're dealing with in this month's episode, we have to address the elephant in the room. As we know, we learned that the U.S. has decided to reimpose its oil blockade on Venezuela, lifting up the temporary suspension of sanctions that was implemented approximately 6 months ago, making the decision to once again impose unilateral coercive measures on Venezuela. And many analysts, including some of our own, even at the Venezuelanalysis website, said that the US was unlikely to take this step given other pressing factors, primarily the US interest in securing stability in international oil prices, but also the migration issue. So, from your point of view, help us unwrap what's going on right now. What's behind this snapback of sanctions, on Venezuela's oil industry?
Hey, José Luis, it's great to be back. It's been a while, yeah, it's a few episodes since I last joined you here. So, indeed, in the end, it wasn't a surprise because we had kind of a build-up of, all these anonymous sources telling us that it was likely that the US was going to revoke General License 44. But even then, there was some speculation if it was going to be replaced with something, a bit more restrictive. I remember this article that you wrote when the Washington Post had some speculation that there was going to be some, finer restrictions on, how Venezuela could get paid and so on. But in the end, there was nothing of the sort. So the U.S. Treasury Department simply let General License 44 expire and introduced some 45-day grace period for companies to wind down their operations and then request additional licenses if they want to continue dealing with Venezuela beyond the end of May. So I think it responds to a lot of things. First of all, kind of shows a bit how disoriented the Biden administration is with respect to its Venezuela policy, because Biden has been in office he has nearly completed his term. And we remember that when he took office, there was an immediate admission that, Trump's policy had failed, even from the US's own interests of, triggering regime change, that Trump's maximum pressure campaign and the interim government nonsense had failed. So they had to try something different. And yet here we are 4 years later, and it's not like this is a return to maximum pressure, but it's 95% pressure. So it kind of shows that the Biden administration has kind of been stuck in two minds. On one hand, cornered by the hawkish sectors in Washington D.C. and the Florida electoral calculations and all of that, and also unwilling to admit that sanctions do cause a lot of damage to the Venezuelan population. Only when they do show up at the US's doorstep, so to say, did we start seeing some sort of admission that there was a correlation between the US's coercive measures against the Venezuelan economy and the migration phenomenon. So I think there are many ways to look at it. In the short term, the US kind of wants to be seen to be doing something because it kind of shows how unpredictable things are, because the US isn't, and the Democrats in particular, are not particularly fond of Maria Corina Machado. She's an extremist. She's really, you talked about stability in the oil markets. She's not really someone who can secure or can ensure stability in any scenario. So if you took a poll in Washington a year ago, I'm sure they would have chosen somebody else. But such is the dynamics of Venezuelan politics and of the opposition itself. She ended up winning this very shady or dubious primary race. She won it, but it still had a lot to be said. And so the US was kind of backed into a corner of having to support her, even though she's hardly the ideal candidate for them. And so once she's barred from running, and there are more than enough reasons for her to be barred from running, the US has to be seen to be doing something in this very ludicrous description of freedom and democracy that we always see in US foreign policy. But at the same time, and I don't want to be referring to my own writing here, I wrote a couple of pieces in the past year trying to look at sanctions from a bit further away. So we always get trapped in this kind of short-term vision. Trump imposed sanctions ahead of the Venezuelan 2018 elections to see if there was enough enough of a squeeze on the Venezuelan population so that they would vote for somebody else. Now we're talking about this electoral calculation and so on. But from afar, we have to keep in mind what are, perhaps the two main goals of the U.S. when it comes to Venezuela, to its Venezuela policy. First, there's we talked about the elephant in the room. There's the elephant under the ground, which are these gigantic oil reserves, and of course, the U.S. wants to have access to them. And on the other, perhaps more importantly, but also related, there is this idea and this very real prospect of an alternative model being constructed here, and so that's a very real threat to U.S. interests. And so the two things are connected in the sense that oil revenues are used to fuel, quite literally, this alternative construction. And so the U.S. wants to achieve these two goals at the same time. So what sanctions do is that they end up limiting Venezuela's sovereignty. So here we're talking about how foreign corporations now need to apply for a license if they want to continue dealing with Venezuela. So this is, in a sense, is Venezuela and whatever foreign partners need to get the US's approval, so to say, because these companies do not want to be targeted by secondary sanctions. And so, in a way, the deals will have to be done in such a way that they do not carry enough of an advantage for Venezuela for the U.S. to deem it a danger. So it's the scope in which Venezuela can operate is much more limited. And so I think that's the kind of the long-term implications of sanctions, and also why they're not going away. I mean, even though they were ostensibly a regime change tactic, despite all the previous cases where we know they don't work in that specific regard, but they stay in place because they limit Venezuela's ability to exercise its sovereignty, to grow its economy, and also because it allows the U.S. not only to limit what Venezuela can do, but also to choose which corporations get to deal in these very advantageous terms that I was mentioning, which companies get to deal with Venezuela.